You call yourself Rogue because you think you are alone, but you are not. And you, Logan, you have had many names, though you cannot even remember them yourself.
Get out of my head, bitch.
Hey, you watch your mouth.
There is no need for this.
Hey, this is Perch. Everybody loves Brian Michael Bendis, right? Right? Brian Michael Bendis used to follow me on Twitter, and then I made one joke too many, and then it all ended. I think the problem is that I told the joke quickly and in one sentence. I didn't use paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of text to explain the joke. That's where we got off on the wrong foot. But anyway, yeah, 4 of you got that. Here's a mail, and let's see this. Let's get this theory. This is a theory on where things went astray. So let's see what this person says. Hey, Perch, I see a recent trend where people claim that certain creators ruined a comic universe or certain characters with certain storylines. Notable example being Captain America becoming an agent of Hydra. They long for the good old days, sometimes mid 2000s, which is odd for me because that's when I decided to largely drop mainstream US superhero comics. Okay. By the way, I like Rick Remender. I absolutely do. I think he's a good writer. I like what he puts out. I like his unique style, and I like Remender. I would say Captain America went off the rails prior. Even though I thought the storyline was bonkers, even I thought the Dimension Z was interesting and a different approach for the character, and all that stuff is true. I think that it was the wrong writer for the wrong moment. It came off of Brubaker and this kind of deep spy stuff. It was definitely a palate cleanser for it. But the problem, it wasn't even the Dimension Z stuff at the beginning. It was the Captain America aging him up and, then bringing in the Falcon and doing the handover, and then Marvel immediately screws over Remender by de-aging him and making him hydrated. Like, there was a swirl there, but it did begin with Remender. I think a lot of people have blamed Nick Spencer and the Hydra Cap, but the damage was being done before then. And I did like the Dimension Z storyline, but then it got into the World War II guy who was blowing LSD bubbles and there's some crazy shit in there that it just was. It was too much of a departure for Brubaker, and it set Captain America up in a weird stand. Granted, I will say I respect the Remender run because we at least did not get Captain America wandering around saying he wasn't sure about his place in America anymore, and if it was even a country he could be proud of, and any of that shit that every other writer until the end of time is going to give us. But all right, back to the mail. The comic that killed X-Men, and to some extent the entire Marvel Universe, was The House of M, which is now considered a classic superhero story. The reason why it got me so mad is because I was a big fan of Morrison's new X-Men and how it changed the world of mutants. The entire run felt like it had purpose and that there was a reason to everything that's going on. Part of it was the increasing number of mutants in the world. Then a few years later, it ended when Bendis came along and undid that entire thing with a magic spell. This got me really angry at Bendis because he was an Avengers writer. So in my mind, at the time, a moron writing Captain America and Friends just swung by and ruined years of storytelling just because he wanted to have a big superhero event. All right, I think there's a lot of truth to this, but let's see how this mail wraps up and we can get into it. Years passed since that time, and I'm no longer as angry about that, to some extent, because I'm not as into Marvel as I was back then. However, from time to time, when I'm reading a superhero story, I think, should I even care about what happens? It can be magically undone. Should I care about these characters? They might just decide to unceremoniously kill them off just to kick off another event. Is it possible that people will change their minds about House of M now? After all, Bendis is no longer a superstar writer, and people start getting more and more upset with consistent events messing with runs. Will people one day just point to this moment and say, this is when it all went to hell? I wonder what you think about all this. Okay. First off, I think that House of M and what was done there, is going to age poorly. Not awful, but I think it's going to age more poorly than people think. I do think there is a I don't want to say a love, but there's a feeling like House of M was one of the good events. And I read House of M about 2 months ago, and that story is clunky. It's way more clunky than I remembered. And I think part of the reason is when you read it, issue by issue, it feels like they're doing something big. We hadn't really gotten an X-Men Avengers kind of team up type story in a while. They hadn't had an event like that. And so I think it had the illusion that something cool and big was going on. But if you actually read that story, it's not good. And it has a lot of just weird kind of almost MacGuffin type moments, and kind of it does kick off something that I think Bendis struggles with, which is he has a hot opening, and then the story just meanders all over the place with side quests that make no fucking sense and all the rest. And then it kind of gets wrapped up in a very unsatisfying battle. If you think about Secret Invasion, if you think about Siege, if you think about several of these stories, several of the events he did, they have that moment of like Big Bang opening. Where is this all going? Seemingly just kind of random silliness going on. Tension inserted where it really doesn't make a lot of sense into a story. Just a lot of kind of goofiness. And then the end payoff is often like the story is telling you why it's important as opposed to you feeling it's important. But anyway, House of M is not great as a story. I'll say it. I know. Now, the Oliver Capil art, beautiful. The fact that, again, we got the amazement of seeing the Avengers and the X-Men kind of interact with each other and this alternate world and all that kind of, I mean, there's some charm to it. But if you actually read the story, it's not as good as you think. And then I do agree that it kicked off kind of, first off, the idea that we've got to have an event every summer. And then it also kicked off this concept of, we can do kind of big status quo changes with, for lack of a better word, silly Billy kind of stuff. And that was a little bit, the Scarlet Witch. I'm just going to whisper no more mutants, going to wipe out most of the mutants. It still is unclear. Even with what Bendis did in Disassembled, it was unclear that Scarlet Witch actually had that power set, that had that capability. They always kind of alluded to, she could do some things that break the world, but they didn't make it so casual and it would come at a big cost and all the rest. And this one, it didn't really come at a big cost at all. And it also set up very weird kind of things out of all of it. Hawkeye kind of disappears, and he sort of, maybe he's reborn because he had been killed and disassembled. Now he's just back, and then Scarlet Witch murders off most of the mutants, or at least depowers them and creates this huge mess. And then she gets to go live kind of as a amnesiac off in Europe. I mean, there's parts of it that if you read it, it's weird as hell. Even the stuff he was trying to do, like one of the big goals he had was to elevate Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. And the idea is like she realizes she could be a better hero if she just tried. But it really, she sets that kind of note up, but he doesn't pay it off. And when he comes back around to writing the character later, he just kind of writes her as an unlikable creep. And like you don't get any of these things that he says he's trying to do. Even the stuff was, I mean, there's all kinds of things in that comic, the dynamic between Xavier and Magneto and kind of where they all sit and how Quicksilver plays into all of it. And it's weird. I do think it set this, I do think it absolutely was one of the moments where Marvel believed they could, kind of wave a magic wand during an event and just upend the entire universe and just tilt it in a different direction for storytelling and merchandising opportunities and new comics that they could do. I think it definitely created that. It's to the detriment of the comic line, because I think one of the truths, and to have a feeling of permanence, a feeling like they're actually, they're going somewhere, that when you buy them, it's going to matter. And I think that this event was one of the big ones that eroded that. it did say that, hey, whatever's going on in X-Men, the comics you're collecting, hey, there's this big thing that happened in this event that just completely, screw all that stuff. It's new now. Now, again, some writers think Peter David did a really good job of picking up the ball and did create some new storytelling opportunities out of it. And I think that was interesting and good for him, and glad he made lemonade out of lemons. But by and large, as a collector, as a reader, it feels like at best a jumping off point, and at worst, like all of your faithful collecting and your money was kind of said, fuck it, we're doing something else. Sorry you spent all that money on that, but hey, it doesn't matter now. That's how it comes across. So I guess I'll toss a question out to you. House of M. You love it? You hate it? What do you think about that event? Do you agree with the letter writer that kicked off a series of bad behaviors from comic companies about how to treat characters and some of the kind of silliness about how they could undo a bunch of things? Or do you think that's being a little unfair? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Thank you very much for the mail, and thanks for listening.